Hello, my name is Andrew Drybrough, and in this presentation I'm going to talk about teaching critical thinking at a master's level. Where do EAP courses fit in? Here is an outline of my talk. The first two sections provide a background to my research, where critical thinking fits in relation to the different UK policy frameworks. And it gives a broad overview of recent trends relating to master's students studying in the UK. Section 3 looks at approaches or methods of teaching critical thinking at university, while Section 4 reports on results from my research on a pre-sessional EAP course evaluation survey. Then the final section presents some points for discussion. So let's look and see where critical thinking fits in within the UK higher educational system, specifically at a master's level. Critical thinking is embedded in the qualification and credit frameworks of the UK, from the QCF, which covers all the nations of the UK except for Scotland. Level 7 is the postgraduate master's level. I use the term postgraduate masters because in Scotland we also have undergraduate masters, but that's another story. At QCF level 7, students are expected to evaluate critically current research and advanced scholarship in the discipline, etc., etc. And for the Scottish equivalent, as we do have a different educational framework here, for the SCQF level 12 master's equivalent, students are expected to apply critical analysis, evaluation, and synthesis, etc., etc. It must also be pointed out that in the UK, students are expected to critically evaluate research at an undergraduate level as well, but that's not the focus of this paper. As part of my PhD, I also did a brief survey of the 23 large research-intensive universities in the UK, known as the Russell Group. I looked at the graduate attributes or transferable skills web pages and found that 15 out of 18 that I could find used the phrase critical thinker or something similar. So here is an example from the graduate attributes webpage of the University of Glasgow, the host institute for this conference, and it talks about students being independent and critical thinkers. Finally, I know there are different perspectives and conceptualizations of what it means to be critical. And I just want to say that I'm focusing on the critical thinking skills, less so on critical thinking dispositions or the critical pedagogical movement. I'm now going to provide a short overview of the trends of international postgraduate master students in the UK. This table shows a 5-year trend of students studying full-time postgraduate taught degrees in UK universities, which are mainly master's courses. As you can see, there has been a significant increase in both UK students and non-EU international students over the 5-year period, both increasing by about 150%. Obviously, this is pre-COVID data, and we are still to see the effects that has had in the UK on student numbers. But non-UK students account for about 60% plus of master students. I say 60 plus because these PGT figures include PGCE or PGDE in Scotland students. These are the students studying for teaching postgraduate certificates, the vast majority of whom are UK domicile. So these are students studying for teaching certificates, as I've said. The latest figure I have for their number was in 2016, and it amounted to about 16,000, which means the actual proportion of non-UK full-time postgraduate taught master students was higher than 60%. What we do know is that because of the more or less shutting down of English language entry testing examinations, such as IELTS, universities had to be more flexible in terms of language proficiency levels among the 2020-21 student intake. However, none of this takes away the duty of care that universities have towards their students, both international and domestic. In fact, it's even more important during the period of lockdowns we've had in the last year for universities to care for their students. And this is an area where we as EAP practitioners can fit in. I've given examples of pre-sessional and EAP language provision here. That's pre-sessional and in-sessional EAP provision, one of which I will return to later. So now I'm going to look at how effectively to teach critical thinking at this postgraduate master's level. The first part of the research presented in this paper was based on Ennis's models of teaching critical thinking at university. Ennis presents three approaches. The first is, which here is on the top left, is labeled as a general method, which involves separate courses that teach critical thinking. The second, here on the top right, is an infusion method, where students are taught how to be critically explicitly in their discipline while learning that discipline. And the third, on the bottom left here, is an immersion method, where students hopefully learn how to engage critically as they learn their discipline, but are not taught explicitly how to be critical. Finally, the fourth type involves some type of mixture of the other three. Abrami et al. Did a meta-analysis of 117 mainly experimental and quasi-experimental studies and found that the mixed method had the largest effect on improving critical thinking skills, whereas the immersion method had the smallest effect. Moderate effects were found for both the general approach and the infusion approach. However, the research they analysed was mainly at an undergraduate level or lower. Let's now look at the challenges of teaching critical thinking at a postgraduate master's level, and specifically in the UK. First, most of us will know that UK masters, unlike most master degrees in the world, are 1 year in duration. That is 12 months of continuous and intense study, as those who have done a master's here in the UK will know. Second, as we have seen earlier, 60% plus of master's students are from non-UK undergraduate educational backgrounds, so may not be familiar with what is expected of students in UK universities. Third, critical analysis and evaluation are key features of the assessment criteria of master's programs, and this is certainly the case in the University of Edinburgh, where I am currently based. This does actually provide us as EAP practitioners with opportunities to provide support through, for example, pre-sessional and in-sessional courses. So referring back to Ennis's model, EAP support could be conceptualized as either a separate course, part of the general method, or as part of a mixed method approach to teaching critical thinking. Now let's look at some of the research that I have done and the findings from my studies. As part of my PhD, I interviewed 12 mainly international master students, and they were from 3 different schools: language education, sports education and business school, and they included 1 Belgian, 1 Brit, 3 Chinese, 1 French, 1 German, 2 Indonesian, 1 Irish, 1 Italian, 1 Japanese person. And they were asked this question here on the top right: how do you think students can best learn to develop their critical thinking skills? And they were given a choice based on Ennis's 4 methods to comment on. You can see the choices here. So here are the results. So 10 out of 12 thought that a separate critical thinking course was a positive thing. However, they conceptualized a separate course in critical thinking in different ways. Some referred to special program-wide events such as lectures that would explain the importance of critical thinking, for example within each department. One thought that the separate course in critical thinking was a credit-bearing research methods course, and others referred to academic or personal tutor support within the university. Finally, there were 4 who referred explicitly to the pre-sessional or in-sessional EAP provision. So in this university, EAP fits in as part of a wider formal student support network. However, there were 2 students who were critical of this general approach of separate courses, as they believed that you need to be critical in a subject, as different subjects had different understandings of critical thinking. Some felt that there was no time to do additional courses due to the time and study pressure of the postgraduate master's degree. Thirdly, 9 out of 10 thought that the infusion method was most effective. This was probably the most popular choice if you were to divide the separate approaches into their different elements above. Finally, a mixed method approach was also popular. This came in different combinations, but the general pattern was that you should begin by being more explicit in relation to what critical thinking was at the beginning of the master's and less explicit towards the end. There are caveats to this research in that these students also appear to be quite capable at master's, maybe at credit or high B and distinction levels, as it was based on purposive and convenient sampling and involved a large amount of self-selection by participants. So these views may not be voicing the concerns of the less able master's students. So here are some examples of quotes from those who supported a separate method. You're welcome to pause the video and read through these, and they cover the different types, the program support, the research methods, and those who thought the EAP, the pre-sessional and in-sessional courses were appropriate. And here are examples of quotes from those who supported an infused or mixed method. Again, you can pause the video and read through these. The second set of findings today, I'll look at EAP students, and based on feedback that we got from a pre-sessional master's course. So in the summer of 2020, we had to pivot our pre-sessional master's EAP courses, and part of the pivot involved reworking some of the material on critical thinking and critical evaluation. So in this 4-week EGAP, or English for General Academic Purposes pre-sessional, we included a number of components. First, we had guest lectures that was really provided lectures that gave students awareness raising about critical thinking. I was actually the person who did those lectures. The second of those lectures was actually also the listening assessment for that course. Thirdly, there were seminar discussions that involved critical reading tasks that would hopefully help develop students, not just their skills, but also their disposition to be critical when approaching academic literature. Fourthly, they were expected to apply the language of criticality in writing and in their speaking assessments, and they're taught how to do that as well. And obviously, because these were in their assessments, within their assessment criteria, criticality was embedded. And finally, tutors were expected to give them feedback in relation to how to be more critical in their writing and their speaking. So here is some feedback from the kind of exit survey, the course evaluation survey from this course. And the statement here was, I feel more able to critically evaluate academic articles and integrate reading into writing. And there was an 84% agreement in response to that statement and a 1.2% disagreement. Is there room for improvement? Yes, there always is. They still got this, these 71 respondents who were not really sure. So definitely room for improvement. Let's look at some of the comments by students in response to that previous statement on the left. You've got, I'll let you read through this, and you can pause the video again. On the right, there was a response to a separate, more open question. What did you find most useful on this course? Okay, so in both cases, they're very positive about their learning of critical thinking. So some final points of discussion here. The bridesmaids refer to the metaphor of EAP departments. like bridesmaids who support the mainstream subject disciplines, the brides, in their role at the great wedding feast of academia. I'll let you work out who the bridegroom is. So here are the questions that I want us to really think about. Maybe we have time to discuss or you can ask questions about or make comments on. So the first one, are we as EAP practitioners, are we stepping on the turf or the coattails or the bridal dress of discipline specialists if we teach how to be critical in a subject? And related to that, if critical thinking is embedded in subject knowledge, should it therefore be left to subject specialists? Thirdly, should we therefore be focusing on language rather than criticality? But the counter to number 3 is number 4. But if criticality is embedded in language at an undergraduate and postgraduate level, should we therefore be teaching students about critical engagement? So it's a few points of discussion for us to really think about and to consider. Thank you for listening. Here are the references, and I'll return us back to these questions just to finish.